In a province of 13 million people, there are only 3 living former Ontario Liberal finance ministers. One of them, Robert Nixon, is 85 years old and lives a couple of hours west of here. The view of Toronto he likes the most is the one in his rearview mirror as he leaves the city. So he will not be with us tonight. But the other 2 former Liberal finance ministers are with us tonight, and we welcome back to TVO Greg Sorbara and Dwight Duncan. And it's nice to see you 2 guys back here at TVO.
Nice to be back.
Good to be back.
By the way, Nixon will be with us because he never misses an edition of the agenda.
He does watch the program. I know that. I get his notes.
Every night, except when the baseball game's on.
We are, back to business here, we're about 2 weeks away from seeing Charles Sousa's second budget. And I'd just like to tap into both of your experiences, respective experiences in budget making. With 2 weeks to go, where are things at usually?
That's an easy question. All the decisions are made. The numbers are being formalized in a budget document. The budget probably will not have gone to press yet, and the minister will be putting final touches on his budget speech. But all the work is done. It's in the can.
Essentially a done deal?
Yeah, this is, in fact, this was, I don't know, Greg, how you felt. This was in all 6 of mine. This was the point in time where it was kind of like being overdue with a baby, I think. That, you just want to deliver and get it over and done with because of leaks and other things. But all the decisions are made.
Is it inconceivable that anything could change between today and May 1st?
They would literally have to. I mean, the numbers were locked down probably 2 weeks ago. The numbers get locked down, then the way it all works out, no, unless they went back to square one.
The minister could put a thing or 2 in his speech, which could be highly controversial. And in fact, Jim Flaherty, whose funeral is today, I think actually did that to Janet Ecker when right at the end of his budget speech, he said, oh, and by the way, we're going to create a tax credit for for parents who send their children to private schools. Nobody but a few people in the Premier's office, Mike Harris's office, and in Flaherty's office knew about it. Janet didn't know a thing about it.
And she was the education minister.
And she was the education minister. So things like that can happen, but pretty much it's all in the can.
The budget is, of course, a financial and political document, and I want to put this next question to you because you had the fun, I guess, of being a finance minister in a minority parliament where I guess it is much more political than financial when it's a minority parliament than when it's a majority government. That's fair to say, right?
Absolutely.
And how does that affect what you have to do?
You have to take into account, unless you make a decision that you want the government to fall. You can put a poison pill in the budget if you want, but you have to take into account the other parties. Now, even when I was still there, the Conservatives said they were voting against anything we did. So we listened to the NDP. When in the last budget I delivered, we adopted a number of things, some of which I wasn't particularly happy about.
Like what?
The
surtax on $500,000 earners?
That, because first of all, it doesn't raise any real money. Second of all, it may actually cost you money. The other one was when we didn't bring our general corporate rate down according to the schedule we had originally laid out, which meant that, in effect, Ontario's corporate taxes on the general rate are still not competitive with a number of other provinces.
You mean they're not high enough? You see, we don't always
You two disagree on this, I think, right?
Yeah.
You were for lower corporate income taxes. You were for higher corporate income taxes.
So the first thing I did when I came to office was raise corporate income taxes. The last thing he did before he left office was lower them.
No. That was one of the first things I did when I replaced you.
I realize. Don't remind me.
No, I'm not in favor of higher or lower. We have to be competitive.
As you were doing budgets in a majority parliament, did you have to consult with the opposition members before making your decisions?
We had to consult broadly across the province, and we had to take into consideration what would be best for the parliament that we were delivering the budget to.
But you had the votes, so you didn't have to worry about the other guys, right?
But nevertheless, look, every budget is essentially the government's, not just its financial plan, but its overall plan for the year and beyond. Throne speeches are a dime a dozen. They don't really mean anything. Governments present what they're going to do over the foreseeable future, short and medium term, in a budget. There is also, it's a highly political document. And you have to consider the politics of the day, and that includes, of course, the makeup of the legislature that the budget is presented to.
Let me ask you about the political part of the budget then. This premier has already taken off the table several revenue tools, as she calls them, in order to help pay for the transportation infrastructure improvements she wants to make. For example, there will be no increase in the harmonized sales tax. There will be no increase in the gas tax. There will be no increase on middle and lower income Ontarians to pay for the $29 billion 10-year plan that she rolled out on Monday. Dwight Duncan, in your view, was it appropriate to take those options off the table?
I won't second guess the premier and her government. I have great respect for what they're doing. She's been the one politician, I think, who has consistently spoken honestly about public transit, the need to pay for it. I'm looking forward to seeing, more detail about how her government will pay for it. This will be a seminal question, both in the budget and if there's an election, whether there's an election this spring, next fall, or whenever. But there are a number of ways of doing this, including, I think, earlier in your show you mentioned assets. That's one that I'm particularly, much more so than my friend Sorbara here, I'm much more supportive of for a whole variety of reasons. Again, part of the challenge the premier has and her government and the minister have is the politics. I mean, we did the health premium, we did the HST, or the HST. Those are not easy, and governments can maybe do one of those in the life of a mandate. And in both those cases, to your point, we had majority governments at the time. So she is walking an incredibly fine line. Frankly, my own view is that all the political leadership in this province over the last generation have not been, and I said this in my last two speeches as finance minister, have not been dealing with the fiscal reality. We've had 5 governments of 3 political stripes. Each one of them in their turn has close to doubled the provincial debt. And we're going to hit a wall.
You bought a car company.
Well, we did. And by the way, we got our money back on one of them. And if we're not crazy, we can sell those shares. When we first did the deal, the break even was about 150 US per share. Today it's about 60.
So you don't want to sell now?
Didn't say that. What I said is you want to be careful about it. And because what we did that other governments didn't do is we wrote them off at the time. That's part of the reason why the 2009 deficit went to $19 billion. The other 2 governments did not write them off. So when they sell them, it will go right to the province's bottom line.
Okay, how about you on that larger issue of the revenue tools taken off the table? Was that a wise thing to do?
Well, I understand the political expediency of it, trying to ensure that there is enough overall support to get a budget passed. But I take a somewhat different view. These are hard things. We are dreaming in Technicolor if we think that there is an easy way to pay for the infrastructure that must be built in this city, in this region, in this province. And the only way to do that effectively is through taxation. Call them revenue tools. It's really bringing together that critical mass of financing that allows us to do the building. So, on the one hand, you can take them off the table and have a little bit of political calm for a while. The other approach is to truly believe in the necessity of doing it, and then go out and put together a critical mass of support to get it done. And the example is sitting right next to me here. Nobody wanted the damn HST, but the government knew it had to do it. And my friend Dwight Duncan took on the project along with his premier, and they got it done.
In partnership with Jim Flaherty.
In partnership with Jim Flaherty. And, if you had done a poll and asked people, do you want an HST? People would say, are you nuts? But, political leadership.
We did do that. And you're right.
They said, are you nuts?
It was a little worse than that.
Okay, let's keep our language clean, however, Minister. So I understand why they did it. I think my approach would have been somewhat different.
Would you raise corporate taxes right now to help pay for this infrastructure improvements?
Frankly, I would.
You would. Would you?
No. I think the answer is the assets. I think we have an interesting configuration of events right now. I personally, having had responsibility for the LCBO, OPG, OLG, and Hydro One at different times in my career. And by the way, you don't have to sell them. There's lots of things you can do short of selling them. Take Terranet, for instance, which I think was initially brought forward by Bob Ray's government, built on by the Harris government.
Just explain what that is.
Oh, it's the land registry system. And the last time you dealt with the land registry system, probably most people don't know who owns it. It's owned now by one of our pension funds, OMERS.
You sold it?
Pardon me?
You sold it?
No, it's a 50-year lease. We still own it.
Okay.
And you've got these large government organizations which have been plagued with problems. And having looked at the experience in the UK, Canada, and by the way, the governments that did the most privatization in both countries were Labour and Liberal. Look at what's going on in Australia now. So I think there's opportunity there. I think there are some, for instance, one of the things we rejected outright, what appeared to be a very easy thing, was charge for parking at the GO stations. But then the question becomes, should the government be the operator of the parking? Because it would be probably one of the largest parking operators in North America. That was a recommendation by Metrolinx. We chose not to do it in my last budget, minority parliament, difficult politically. I think our taxes are competitive right now. I don't think they're low. I don't think they're high.
Couldn't go up a half a point?
And well, the problem is the corporate tax won't raise enough.
A couple $100 million if you raised it half a point?
Well, then you got to find, by the way, $29 billion for transit. Metrolinx says it's 50. And experts inside repeatedly briefed us that they felt the 50 was too low. The taxes that'll do it, in terms of the amounts you need, are personal taxes on lower income people and the HST.
Well, let's follow up on that, because in your last budget, you put a surtax on people making more than $500,000 a year as part of your agreement to get NDP support on your budget. Would you, if you were doing the budget today, in order to raise money for all of what we're talking about, lower that threshold from $500,000 in annual income?
No, I wouldn't, and I'll tell you why. First of all, there's been chatter about increasing the personal income tax of people with incomes of $150,000 or more. $150,000 of income in a family living just about anywhere in Ontario is not a high lifestyle. Those families are watching every penny and being very careful about whether they're going to take a vacation or send the kids to hockey or what. So I don't think there is tax room in that section of the income tax system.
A lot of room between 150 and 500, though.
Well, I mean, but what I heard was 150,000. So where's the threshold? I don't think that's where you go. There's a vast amount of wealth in this province running into the hands of fewer and fewer people. I'm not sure yet how you get at that, but my analogy is we've got a problem with income distribution. My metaphor is, when you're playing Monopoly and one person ends up with all the money, the game is over. And the game is the best fun when the wealth is more equitably distributed. So, I don't have the answers. I would not tax personal incomes. I supported the tax on incomes of over $500,000, but I wouldn't venture into that area in this budget, but maybe the minister will.
Part of the challenge, one of your initiatives that you started and that I eventually completed, was the elimination of the capital tax.
Yeah.
And that is one thing they could do that, again, I personally would not be too keen on as a way to deal with the corporate balance sheets where they're at right now, because Ontario has a problem, according to the IMF, the OECD, Ontario and Canada, the size of our corporate balance sheets. But again, I think the three of us around this table are old enough to remember when the Bank of Montreal was headquartered in Montreal, and when, there were other reasons, and taxes, obviously. But I mean, one day, if we're not careful, and this is something Don Drummond said to me, you can sustain a small difference in taxes, but one day you'll wake up and TD Bank won't be in Toronto, at least the headquarters.
Well, I'm not exactly sure that we're anywhere near that. And the fact is that we also remember when the personal income tax rate for people with very high incomes was in the neighborhood of 80%. I think in Britain it was 90% at one point. And, those were times when governments had a very ambitious mission to build up society. And since that time, right across Canada, right across North America, every single government is strapped. They cannot do enough for vulnerable populations. They cannot do enough on infrastructure. They can't maintain hospitals. Schools in some part of this continent are absolutely crumbling. So I'm saying, let's have a look at where the money is and let's figure out how we can get at it.
Well, we're tied for the highest tax rate on the upper income with Nova Scotia. And the UK is at about that rate now as well, although I think they're taking that off as we speak. Over the next couple of years, they're bringing it down again. I'm not disputing that we should be looking at these things. I'm just saying you've got to, and by the way, those days you couldn't move money with the push of a button, which is already happening. When we looked at the corporate tax rate, we had an estimate that Ontario was losing, up to $500 million a year in revenues by the way corporations were moving money around. Now, is that right or wrong? I'm not suggesting it's right or wrong. I'm just saying
it is.
That's the reality. And that's why I use the word competitive. It's not ideologically driven in my mind. It's simply, and by the way, we're actually very competitive relative to surrounding American jurisdictions right now. And there will continue, I think, to be challenges associated with the competitiveness of our tax system.
Okay, let's talk some. We like to talk mostly policy here, but we do talk a little politics as well. And given the precarious nature of the current minority parliament, this feels like a good time to do it. You did negotiate with the NDP in order to get their support on your budgets. This premier has already said she's not interested in doing it. It's basically up or down. We're presenting it, it's up or down. Take it or leave it, and in her words, I'm happy to go to the people on it if you don't like it. Is that the appropriate approach in your view?
I think so, particularly because this government now has, it's well planted, it has some experience. Let's also point out that this premier, Kathleen Wynne, invited both of the opposition parties to make their submissions as to what they thought should be into the budget. And when I was there, I think when Dwight was there, we paid very careful attention to the approach of the opposition parties. So that information is there. But I think it's time that the government said, look, here's the plan. If you like it, we would like your support. If you do not like it, well, you have the alternative of voting it down and casting this province into an election. It's going to be high drama. I wouldn't bet the family farm on any particular result, but I think she's taken the right approach.
Your view?
I concur, and also we're now almost 2 years, almost 2.5 years.
2.5 years
into a minority parliament. I think the average lifespan of minority parliaments is about 24 months. At some point, a government's got to govern, and the Conservatives have chosen a path right from the beginning. The NDP were prepared to negotiate. Frankly, I would have loved to have been able to look them in the eye on a few things and tell them to go stuff it at the time. We did things that we didn't.
You do that most every day in Parliament.
I did in the question period, but we did have to compromise, and that's...
Why didn't you?
Because the province didn't want another election within 6 months of the last one. I think we're at a different point now, and I think the Premier has decided that she is going to present a plan. I haven't seen a plan from the other guys. Mr. Hudak's going to, like Mayor Ford, is going to build subways, the most expensive, and not tell you how he's going to pay for it. Oh, some vague notion about waste. Well, we heard that in Toronto.
We're trying very hard not to be too partisan here today.
Yeah, we are trying hard, but I mean, that's what they said. Not me.
Both opposition parties think they can do what Premier Wynne is proposing to do, vaguely speaking, in broad strokes, without raising taxes.
Premier Wynne has said that she will define that in the budget, which is the appropriate time to do that, and then we'll see if the others are prepared to do that.
If you're a finance minister, do you care whether an election is held as a result of your budget failing to pass Parliament or you don't?
I think it depends on the political climate. If, for example, the things in your budget have relatively broad political appeal, then you're just as happy to let it fail in the Parliament. In the budgets that I presented, and the budgets that Dwight presented, we always think of the political implications, and as one gets closer to an election, those political implications become ever more important. My last budget was in 2007. That was March of 2007, and we knew that the election would be held in October of 2007. So I wrote a budget with my officials and with the party and with the Premier with that election in mind. In a minority parliament, you have to know what the potential consequences of. And look, that ministry and that government have probably done an awful lot of polling to determine what might sell and what might not.
But John Crosby's budget in 1979 is the one everybody hearkens to, where he put in what he thought was a very responsible increase in the gas tax to deal with deficit reduction. It got voted down. Tories lost power. They didn't get back for 5 years.
They couldn't count their votes in the House, much less in the country. I would just add, I don't know how you felt, but after you do your budget, you watch for the editorials, you watch the agenda to see what the reaction is, and the thought of it, it's a bit just kind of more ego than anything. But yeah, I wouldn't mind going let the people decide if this is a good budget or bad, because you're always in a parliament where it's going to pass, or at least it's going to be accepted, whether it's popular or unpopular. It wouldn't be bad just to put something to the test, like Greg had the opportunity. He had great timing too. He got out right before the downturn.
Yeah. That was prescient, was it
yes.
not?
From your perspective, but it's a great opportunity for the finance minister, and for the Premier and for the government. You said earlier on, it's a policy and a political document. And this one in particular, because whether we have an election in the spring, I doubt very much that there will be, even if we don't go this spring, I doubt very much there would be another budget.
The thing is so we'll take the current political context. A finance minister might draft a very political budget designed to appeal to voters if the budget is defeated and we go to the people. That's all well and good, but if the political environment is such that people don't frankly care what's in the budget, but they're mad as hell about gas plants, or they're mad as hell about windmills, or they're mad as hell because the teachers are on strike, it might not do you any good.
Gotcha. We've got literally a minute left here, and on the day when so many people are gathering to remember Jim Flaherty, you two both worked with him on some big stuff, and I just like your Dwight Duncan, first your recollections of having worked with Jim Flaherty, with whom you crossed swords numerous times.
Oh, many times. But everything, it's funny reading comments from a range of people. Everything that I've seen in the paper about him, the public persona versus the individual. First of all, I was deeply saddened for both him and his family. Just to reach that point in your life where you can start doing what you want to do and to be taken like that is just a terrible thing. But he was fun to be around in private. And we weren't close. I can count on one hand the number of times we had dinner together. But he did have that Irish way about him. He had a nice laugh, a good sense of humor.
And when he beat you up in the press, you didn't mind it?
Well, I just beat him back harder. And Murray Campbell did a wonderful column after something, I forget what it was, in 2008. He attacked us, and Murray compared it to two Irishmen outside a bar having a brawl. But he could be very warm, he could be very generous, and he was a great Canadian.
Last word to Greg.
Jim literally gave his life for politics. That's how hard sometimes that work is. He was passionate. He had a very high degree of integrity. Personally, I disagreed with a number of things that he did as finance minister, but I respect the way in which the standards that he personally brought to the way in which he did his work. That's why he kept getting reelected, and that's why he stayed as finance minister for so long.
That's a good place to leave this. I want to thank the two of the three ex-Liberal finance ministers for coming into TVO tonight. say goodnight to Bob Nixon. Greg Sorbara, Dwight Duncan, it's good to have both of you back here at the table.
He's sitting at home wishing he was here now so he could teach us both a lesson.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.